you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits, GymWits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, aka Tips with Tony, a registered dietitian.
And we are the GymWits.
So today we have one of our most fascinating interviews ever. And we're also very happy to tell you that Tony is in on it with us. We thought that it would be very appropriate for your favorite dietitian to be present for an interview, a discussion on fat. And we have Dr. Sylvia Tara, who has written a book called The Secret Life of Fat, and we hope you enjoy our interview. Hey everyone, we are here with Dr. Sylvia Tara. How's it going?
It's going great. How about for you?
Very well. Thanks for coming on the GymWits. Now, Dr. Tara is a biochemist, and she wrote an awesome book that Ryan's read. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to read it, or Tony either, but we will most certainly read it.
Well, yeah, Sylvia, first, I think the book is amazing, and I think it's great for anybody at any level. But before we get into kind of discussion on the book and what got you to write it, can you we always ask our people to come on the show to tell us a little bit about their own exercise program. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So, the thrust of my managing weight really is it's exercise, but also diet. So I do intermittent fasting, where I don't really eat much after 3 or 4 o'clock. So I have a tightened time window in which I eat, which is around 10 to 3 o'clock a day. And then I also do exercise, and I do high-intensity interval training, where I do 8 rounds of 20 seconds of really intense exercise, 10 seconds of rest, and I do that 8 times in a row. Usually it's running or it's an elliptical machine. And I do some strength building exercise too. I try to get that in at least twice a week, where I'm doing my biceps, triceps, abs, all those things. And so that's pretty much it. But overall, there's HIIT, which is about 4 minutes, and then that's worked into at least half an hour a day on the elliptical or the treadmill.
Awesome. And so your book is called The Secret Life of Fat. And can you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write that book? Like, what gave you the inspiration to really to do the research and the work that was necessary to put that together?
Yeah, so I gain weight very, very easily, and I always have my whole life. Even as a child, I watched my friends be able to eat whatever they want and stay really thin, and it seemed like I could just have, one bite of candy or cookie, and I would gain weight. And that extended into adulthood, where I had to really be careful about my weight. It felt like I could hardly eat, and yet people around me were eating what they wanted to. They weren't excessively doing exercise, and I didn't understand it. And I was about to go on, yet another diet to try something new, and I thought, you know what? Before I do one more diet, I really want to understand fat, in particular my stubborn fat. So I'm a PhD in biochemistry, so I have the training to investigate fat. If anyone can do it, I certainly can. And so I spent 5 years digging through all of the scientific literature on fat, everything, all the research. I spoke to over 50 researchers around the world about their cutting-edge work on fat. And what I found out about fat was so interesting, really just so fascinating. I thought I have to capture this in a book. I have to share this with everybody. And The Secret Life of Fat is that book. And what it turns out is that fat's very clever. It almost has a mind of its own, and it's no wonder that people are always yo-yo dieting, losing and gaining. Fat has all kinds of tricks at its disposal to come back on you.
So is not a lot known about fat? And how did fat become so stigmatized in our society? I especially remember when I was growing up, everything was low fat this, and I know it's a different concept. But how did the fat get so stigmatized?
Yeah, so fat, throughout history, fat has been in fashion and out of fashion. And believe it or not, there was a time in America where fat was really loved and cherished. It was right after the Civil War, when there was destruction and poverty, and food was hard to come by. And in that time, fat was really admired. In fact, there was something called a fat man's club, where fat men had to be fat enough to join. It was seen as a symbol of prestige. There were columns in the newspapers and magazines telling women how to gain weight. And so fat was certainly loved at this time. Of course, we know about the Rubenesque paintings during the Renaissance, where fat was loved again. But in America, what happened is after that time, after the Civil War, when fat was loved, as the economy got better, food was easier to come by, and people started gaining weight. And what you saw then was just a kind of turn of tides where now people were getting worried about gaining weight. In fact, leaders were saying that we have to be careful about fat. Religious leaders came out saying it wasn't pious to be fat. The new manufacturing age came about, and business leaders said they needed agile bodies, for which to do factory work. So they wanted lean bodies too, and the military, stressed lean bodies. And so there became this kind of echo chamber around fat. Look out for your fat. Be careful about fat. And of course, who else to come to the aid of these suffering people other than businesses who took great advantage of people's fears of fat and started selling all kinds of crazy things to get rid of fat. For a while, some huckster and entrepreneur types, they went about selling things like fat off soap, where you were supposed to use the soap and it was supposed to melt the fat under your skin. For a time, people swallowed tapeworm eggs, hoping that the tapeworms would hatch. They would siphon off calories. It is crazy. And after you lost some weight, you would drink poison to kill the tapeworms. And this is how desperate people became, to lose weight. And this is how little they knew about fat and weight at the time. So a lot of dangerous things out there. And that small business has now burgeoned into a multi-billion-dollar diet industry that we have now. So our methods have changed, but we're still on this obsession to lose our fat. What I found out in my research is that, fat is actually very intricate. It's an organ. It's not just a reserve of calories sitting there. And that's how we think of fat. The masses of people think about fat as blubber. It's this greasy excess. We should get rid of it at all costs. It's completely unhealthy. And my research really showed the opposite, is that if you don't have enough fat, you actually get a whole bunch of health issues. And I wrote about the story of Christina Vina, who was a teenager who just started spontaneously losing fat. And she had many health issues. Her liver inflated. She couldn't stop eating. She had this enormous appetite, but she kept losing weight. And when you don't have fat, that's when you start to appreciate just how important it is. And so what our fat is really, rather than just blubber or a reserve of calories, it's actually an endocrine organ, meaning that it releases hormones into our body that our body depends on. So it's not very different from your thyroid gland or your adrenal gland. It's a gland, in a way. It's part of our endocrine system. And so when you lose too much fat, you lose those hormones, and a lot of things go awry. Now, one thing that's really important for people who are trying to manage weight is that fat actually has a huge influence on your appetite and your metabolism. Fat releases a hormone called leptin. And so when you lose fat, you start to have less leptin too. And leptin is a hormone that circulates in your blood, and it directly controls your appetite. So when you lose weight, you start to get more obsessive about food. You start to have a bigger appetite. Not only that, but leptin that's released from fat also binds to muscle cells, muscle tissue. And it actually has an effect on metabolism. So when you lose some leptin, you start to have a slower metabolism, about a 22% slower metabolism. So interestingly enough, losing fat, it triggers this reaction in the body where the body tries to get back that fat. It's not used to having less fat. It's not used to having less leptin. It wants you to eat more. It wants you to conserve energy. And in this way, fat tries to come back. And this effect I talked about when we lose weight, it actually lasts for a long time. It's not necessarily temporary. It's been studied for 6 years, and it might last forever in people, where once they've lost a certain amount of weight, they're hungrier and they have a lower metabolism. And that's why we see so much weight regain after people lose weight. People think they can, eat as normal after they lose weight again, or eat like their thin friend, but they can't. They actually have a caloric penalty. So if I can just go on for one more minute here, is that so someone who was 170 pounds and lost 20 pounds to get to 150 pounds, and you compare that person to someone who's 150 pounds naturally, that person who had to lose weight to get to 150 pounds now has to eat about 22% fewer calories than the person who's naturally at 150 pounds. And that's because of that decrease in metabolism that you get after you have some weight loss. And if you don't know this, then you are really prone to regain weight after you've lost some.
So, no, I guess it's funny because we were going to ask you about this, and so I guess I'll ask my kind of follow-up questions. First off is, does that ever return? So once you lose those calories, once your metabolism slows, let's say if you're able to maintain that weight, does the metabolism ever increase back to what would be normal for that weight, or does it always stay at that level?
Yeah, I think it varies depending on people. The research I've looked at, what they've measured is that this seems to last for years, really years, where it's not coming back. I think for some people it comes back a bit, the body normalizes at a new set point, and they're okay. So you more or less have to monitor yourself. How are you reacting? Try eating a little bit less. Even after you've lost weight, stay at that diet kind of paradigm for a long time. And you'll notice if you can start eating a little bit more without gaining or not. Keep a really good diet log on what's happening. See what's making you gain weight and what's not. You kind of have to measure for yourself because I don't think it goes away for everybody.
And then I guess the other question I had, this is more relevant to Justin and I are both into combat sports and we're both fans of and participate in various sports. And weight cutting is a huge part of those sports where people can lose upwards of 30, 50 pounds. I've lost as much as 30 pounds within a month of a fight. Do you know, does that have detrimental effects for people who do that all over and over, or do their bodies kind of adapt to that? Like you have kids who've been wrestling since they're 6, 7, 8 years old, who've been doing that their entire lives. Like, do you reap the kind of effects of that over the course of time?
Yeah, yo-yo dieting in general is bad for weight loss because your body gets smarter about it. Like I said, there's that kind of almost permanent effect of your metabolism is lower, and then you gain weight. So you're going back and forth. So repeated weight loss actually does have some detrimental effects. It makes it harder to lose weight later. Now, I don't know how much you're losing. The research that's been done, it shows it for when people lose 10% of their body weight. If you're just losing 5 pounds here and there, I'm not sure it makes a difference. But if you're losing 20 pounds, back and forth, and I think that does make a difference then. It does make it harder for weight loss in the future.
And does it count? I guess, so let's say someone loses 10% of their body weight, but over the course of a year, is there a difference between doing that over a short period of time versus doing it over a long period of time?
So if you lose weight fast versus you lose it over like a year or so?
Yeah, so will you still suffer the same metabolic effects?
I don't know that that's been studied. I would imagine that yes, you do, because it's about the amount of fat that you're losing. Because remember, fat is producing leptin, it's producing adiponectin, it's even producing estrogen. So when you're losing fat, you're losing some of those hormones. And if you do it fast versus slow, you still have a reduction in the number, in your fat tissue. So I don't think that the time at which you lose necessarily matters, though it hasn't been explicitly studied that I've seen.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, as a dietitian, I definitely see that trend when people go on yo-yo diets, their weights go up and down. And I think it gets harder as they, every single time that they try a new diet or a new trend. But I'm wondering if also age plays a factor and gender plays a factor. Have you found anything, or even just, nutrigenomics, like some people adjust faster than others. Have you found anything in your studies with that?
I'm so glad you asked because the entire middle section of the book is all about how all those factors you just mentioned, age, genetics, hormones, even bacteria and viruses play a role in how we gain weight. So because I have this stubborn fat, I had to really understand everything about that because it did feel to me like I was gaining disproportionately and unfairly compared to other people. And so I had to look at, why would that be? Why would my weight be so stubborn? And, one thing I did look at is the genetics of weight. And certainly Claude Bouchard at Pennington Labs in Louisiana has done a lot of work here on looking at twins and how twins lose and gain weight. And he found that they typically have the same tendency. So if they put them on an exercise program, like the identical twins will lose weight at around the same rate, and they'll gain weight at the same rate, which is completely different than other sets of twins that might lose or gain easier or harder, right? So there's a genetic component to it. And there's specific genes as well that give a person a preponderance towards, or propensity towards weight gain. And I write about this in The Secret Life of Fat. One is called IRS1. And depending on the variants that you have of that gene, you can be storing away more fat compared to somebody else. Gender you asked about. So women, I have a whole chapter on women and fat. I have a husband who can eat whatever he wants anytime, and he still fits into his college jeans. And I can't tell you how frustrating this is. It's really unfair.
As a woman on the team, I can understand that.
Yeah, right. And so it set me on this, month-long drive. I had to understand. I read everything, and there's actually a few scientists in the world who study exactly this: women versus men fat gain. Women partition more nutrients into fat automatically. It's automatic. So like if you're eating 100 calories, say, women might put away, 30 of those calories into fat immediately, whereas as men do less. It might be 10%. Men are putting more into glycogen and muscle and different places compared to women. So we're good fat storers. And that's, it's hard to take. And really we see that even at baby girls, as soon as they're born. There's a big study that measured 5,000 babies. And even at birth, girls have more fat than boys. And it probably happens even in utero before they're born. Girls are just storing away more fat. We partition more nutrients into fat. We store it at 2 to 3 times the rate that men store fat. The good news in all of that is that women tend to be metabolically healthier. So we don't have lipids and cholesterol hanging around in our blood as much as men do. We store it into our fat tissue, which gives us a lower risk of heart attacks, metabolic disease compared to men. But it does give us bigger thighs, bigger hips, that too. And, what is interesting too that I found is that women will use their fat. So at a time of fast, right, when we wake up, after fasting overnight or after, when we're energy depleted, like after a long workout, we actually use our fat for energy, whereas men tend to use more glycogen, which is energy in the muscles. But that sounds like great news, but the problem is as soon as we go back to eating, we store fat much more readily than men, and we have a bigger reaction to exercise. So women produce more ghrelin after exercise, and ghrelin's a stomach hormone. It produces the sensation of hunger. It's one of the hormones that do that. Yeah. And we have more of it after we exercise compared to men. So women tend to overcompensate a bit more too. So it's just one of those watch out things that I write about in the book. And lastly, you mentioned hormones, and yes, certainly as we age, our fat-burning hormones like growth hormone, testosterone, estrogen, they start to decline. And so you see some middle-aged pudge. And that's because things that used to burn up our calories, burn up our fat, we don't have as much of those hormones hanging around anymore. Some people go out and get hormone replacement therapy, but there's also exercise you can do that increases some of those hormones. And so, it's just something we live with. But those are all the kind of secrets about fat that I'm really glad I figured out, because I think a lot of us have this tendency to blame ourselves. We're doing something wrong, something's not right. But really, there's natural reasons, real reasons why weight loss can be harder for some people versus others.
Absolutely.
So one of the things you mentioned, and I thought was one of the more fascinating parts of the book, was the role that bacteria may or may not play in how one burns energies. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was really interesting to me too. So we have all this bacteria in our gut, and it helps us digest food. And depending on the bacteria that you have, you could be extracting more calories out of your food versus less. So that box of Cheerios that says 100 calories a serving, depending on what you got in there, the bacteria that are actively helping you digest, you could be getting 120 calories a bowl instead of 100 calories like it says on the label, or you could be getting 70 calories a bowl. It's really very individual. And this also explains in part why some people can eat more than other people can and not gain weight. This is a really evolving area of research, and it's changing almost yearly. The conclusions or takeaways are changing, and the thought was that the bacteria called Firmicutes was more attributed to obesity. It helped extract more calories, and the other Bacteroidetes phyla was something that more was associated with leanness. And I think the more recent research is showing that really it's diversity of bacteria. And what's interesting is that fat begets fat in a way. So if you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, the diversity of those, fruits and vegetables, people like that tend to have a highly diverse gut microbiome, whereas people who eat a lot of processed foods, high carbs, high fats, they tend to have less diversity. And so less diversity is seen as something that's associated with more weight. But, which one begets, the microbiome? That's the question. But it's almost like thin begets thin. So if you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, you have a healthy microbiome, and it's very diverse, and it's extracting less out of that food as well. Whereas fat begets fat, because if you're eating those high energy foods, you have a microbiome tilted towards one that extracts a lot of calories out of food. You're getting even fatter from that food. And so this is one learning I actually took really something away from. And part of my diet plan is I eat this big salad for lunch every day. I fill up on really fibrous foods, the foods that make it hard for my bacteria to digest anything. And you end up passing more as waste, but you're full at the same time, and you're getting nutrition at the same time too. So it's one of those takeaways that I write about in the book that, a really easy win is just, start putting in a lot more salad with your food. It's filling, it helps your microbiome, you're extracting less out of that food.
So I guess related to what you're saying is shifting gears a little bit, but is I don't know what you call me, the quality of fat in your body. You mentioned that fat is not created equal. There's visceral fat and subcutaneous. white versus brown. What's the distinction between the different fats?
Yeah, and this is an interesting point too, is that we have all kinds of different fat in our body, and some of it is critical to life. You don't want to lose any of it. So we have, the white fat's the kind that we do want to lose, right? So the white fat is the kind under our, our thighs, our buttocks, our arms. That's the fat that we use. That's the fat that's emitting leptin, like I said. It's emitting estrogen and adiponectin, the hormones as well. But that's the fat that our body would reach for to lose weight. There's another kind of white fat, and that's visceral fat. That's the fat underneath our stomach wall. And that's the kind that tends to get really inflamed. It's linked to diabetes type 2. It's linked to heart disease. When we get too much belly fat, which is what visceral fat is, it tends to become inflamed. It sends out inflammatory signals. It makes us unhealthy. It's the most important fat to get rid of, to tell you the truth. And you can tell if you have a lot of belly fat if you lie flat. If your stomach flattens when you lie down, that's a decent indicator that that's not visceral fat. That's just subcutaneous fat, the fat under your skin, which is a healthier fat to have. But if you have a paunch even when you're lying down, then it's probably underneath your stomach wall. That is probably visceral fat, and that's something to get rid of. Now, on the good side, we also have brown fat, and brown fat's around our heart area, it's around our spine and our neck, and that is fat that, rather than just hoarding calories, it's actually burning calories to produce heat for our body. And so, swimmers, cold water swimmers will have more brown fat than others. And it's an area of research that's being looked at now. Is it possible to inject brown fat into people to help them lose weight? And that's, it's pretty far out there, but it's at least being looked at. And then we have other kinds of fat as well. So, we have fat in our brain. Our brain is highly, it's a big component of our brains is actually fat. The myelin around our nerve cells is made of fat, and it helps it conduct signals. And so, that's critical fat to have. You don't want to lose that at all. In fact, in every cell membrane we have, it's made of cholesterol and lipid. It's vital to our good health. And so it's just something, to think about. When we're thinking about losing fat, the most important kind to lose is the visceral fat. And second to that, it's keeping your subcutaneous fat, that white fat right underneath your skin, on your thighs and buttock, keeping that at a healthy level too.
So I guess the next natural question that a lot of people would be wondering, the source of fat calories, and if it actually matters. You hear all the time, well, you don't want to eat saturated fat, or you want to eat omega fat, stuff like that. Does it matter? Is this related to the type of fat that will develop in your body? And then I guess the part two of that question is, can you be healthy and fat, or overweight, or whatever term to be used for that?
You can be healthy and fat. In fact, I write about sumo wrestlers in the book. Sumo wrestlers are obviously obese, but surprisingly, they're metabolically healthy. So we talked about hormones that fat releases, and we talked about leptin. Another hormone fat releases is called adiponectin. And what adiponectin does is it comes out of fat cells, and it circulates in the blood, and it tells any fat in the blood to get stored into fat tissue. Come home to fat tissue where you belong. Do not circulate in the blood. Do not go all over the place. Come to subcutaneous fat tissue. And that's the tissue, again, the fat tissue that's subcutaneous, that's underneath. It's on our butts, it's on our thighs, our arms. It's right underneath the skin. It's not visceral fat. Now, when we exercise, we actually release adiponectin. Fat will release adiponectin into the blood. Sumo wrestlers exercise for about 7 hours a day. So although they're eating 5,000 calories a day, they're eating an abundance, and they're obviously obese, they actually have very little visceral fat. And so they're healthy. They don't have metabolic disease. They're not having heart issues. They're actually quite fat and fit. Surprisingly, when they stop exercising, when they retire and come off their regime, they get metabolically unhealthy very quickly. They start to deposit, visceral fat again. So that's really important, thing to know about. Like, you can't eat fat, you can't even be fat. It really depends on where is your fat. It's always best to not be extremely overweight to begin with. But if you're going to be overweight, the best place to store it is in subcutaneous fat, away from your internal organs.
And the source of your fat calories, is that related?
That makes a difference.
Okay.
I have not seen anything, depending on the type of fat you eat, whether it's olive oil, avocados, or lard, does that make a difference on where fat goes? I've not seen research that indicates it does.
I think anything in excess, when it turns to fat, can be detrimental, because we don't know where exactly, you don't know where it's going to go. So at the end of the day, you still have to control your fat intake, whether it's from saturated, trans, obviously heart-healthy fats are going to be more beneficial for your health, but where it actually gets stored is, like you said, I haven't read anything about that either.
Yeah, and I do have, some of my readers will email me and tell me what they're doing, what's working for them. And I have one who, part of his diet, he's gone to a high-fat diet. And this is pretty cutting edge. It's pretty new.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing that now. Yeah.
Yeah, 60% of his calories are coming from fat, and he's losing a lot of weight. So I find that fascinating. It really has to do with the insulin levels we're provoking, and just our bodies getting into the pathway of burning fat, using fat for energy. Which is the ketogenic type diets we'll do. And so, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different factors that go into play.
Yeah.
The sumo example is really good because I was in Japan a couple of years ago, and part of our trip there, we did like we had done like a tour with of a sumo kind of training facility. I don't know exactly what it's called, but part of it we also got to eat their traditional meal, and it's massive, but it's relatively healthy. They just eat humongous quantities, but also just watching them as athletes, they're as good athletically as any other sport I've seen. And I've had the opportunity to work with some high level amazing athletes. So yeah, it really is a great example of like how you can be quote unquote fat, but also very, very fit.
I always wanted to have a pet sumo wrestler. I thought it would just be awesome to walk around with a sumo wrestler. Like anywhere you go, like it's just like, people would just sort of let you pass. You want to get into a nightclub, you got a sumo wrestler with you, they probably let you in, right?
Great bodyguard to have.
So I guess shifting gears back to the book. So you go to great lengths to discuss what you do to keep your weight off, and it's pretty involved and impressive. The extent that you go to keep track of your calories and what works and what doesn't work in your exercise, and you kind of talk about the process as well. So I guess obviously it's not one size fits all, and that's one thing you get right away from reading the book. But what's the best approach or strategy that someone can take, when they're, is struggling to keep the weight off, but they want to begin in earnest? Like, what are some tips that someone can take to really get started on the right foot?
Yeah, it's so good that you asked me that, because I'm working on a course to go along with the book right now. It'll be an online course, and I'm trying to help guide people exactly to that, very issue. So let me just say before I forget, if anyone's interested in the course or wants to know more, sign up at www.thesecretlifeoffat.com. Add your email, and I'll let you know when the course is available. But it's exactly what I'm working towards. And some of the quick wins that people can do that I'm writing about, one thing I mentioned earlier is just start replacing some of your meals with a lot of solid fibrous foods, right? Take advantage of your microbiome. Right, the more diversity of fruits and vegetables you eat, the more diverse your microbiome, the less extraction of calories hopefully you'll have after that. All right, so like in your lunch, instead of having spaghetti or a sandwich or something like that, have a nice big salad. And you can make it a luxury salad. You don't have to be low fat about this. Like I put avocado in, I put cheese in, I put like a ranch dressing. Like I make it taste good and make it something I want. And that right there will start helping right away. It will help in reducing calories. It will help with your developing a good microbiome. The other thing to think about is, really fat loss is hormonal. And so start to play off your hormones. So insulin is something that's going to make us gain weight. And insulin comes from the pancreas. So after we eat like a sugary, fatty kind of thing, kind of meal, we produce insulin, and it helps store things out of our blood and put it into our fat. So it'll make you gain weight. Things that help you burn weight are growth hormone, testosterone, estrogen, which are things that really come out during fasting and come out during exercise. So make use of that. So eat less sugar. Now, this is an obvious one, right? But eat less sugary foods, because that's a lot of your insulin. So as much as you can cut back on that, that's great. Cut back on white bread. Cut back on, rices. Just whole wheat if you're going to eat some carbohydrates. Brown rice is good, but try to prevent a lot of insulin spike. The next thing is that if you want to take advantage of growth hormone peaks at night in us. And so if you can extend that overnight fast, it will help, because actually eating inhibits the circulation of growth hormone a bit. So the overnight growth, sorry, I got tongue-tied there, but the peak is overnight for growth hormone. And if we extend the overnight fast, we actually have more circulating growth hormone in our blood at that time. So this is one thing I take a lot of advantage of, is that I stop eating like around 3 or 4 o'clock when I'm dieting, right? I will skip dinner and I'll have a late breakfast around 10 o'clock. I extend that overnight fast and I lose weight. So I have probably some of the most stubborn fat that anyone's ever heard of. It's really hard for me to lose weight, but my body can't resist that. I have no calories circulating, my growth hormones going. My body has to burn the fat. I force it to. High intensity interval training, which I do also a few times a week at least, that also is known to produce testosterone and growth hormone in people. So stop thinking of it so much as foods. Think of it more as hormones, dieting. What hormones do you need to secrete or do you need to inhibit in order to get your fat to melt? So you want less insulin, you want more growth hormone, more testosterone. Less insulin means less sugary foods, less carbohydrates. More growth hormone, testosterone means extending the overnight fast and doing some pretty intense exercise to get your testosterone and growth hormone levels up.
So I just want to add to that. So that's something that's definitely worked for you and you've been able to sustain that. Now what happens if someone who does attempt that and they can't sustain that? What recommendations would you have for them?
Yeah, and that's a good one, because you do have to make a diet work for you. And this is really important because, as I mentioned, that the increase in leptin as you're losing weight, that lower metabolism, higher appetite, that's something that lasts for years. So if you can't last on a diet year after year, you're going to regain that weight.
Right.
So I know there's a ton of diets out there. Some of them are so restrictive. It involves 5 to 6 meals a day, all this prep time. If you don't have time for that, don't get on that diet. You won't succeed in the long run. Mm-hmm. Same with my diet. It's pretty intense, and I've learned to stay on it, more or less for the long haul. But if it's uncomfortable for you, you're going to have to modulate. It might mean that your weight loss is a little bit slower, which is fine. Go at a pace that's comfortable for you. So I'd say in that case, you might not want to do the fast that I do. That's a pretty long fast, 4 o'clock at night to 10 o'clock the next day. Make it a little easier. Eat up to 6 o'clock, right? Eat a little bit more at night. Ratchet. So what you could do is take your dinner time, ratchet it earlier and earlier until you start to see some weight loss. Mm-hmm. And if you're okay with losing 1 or 2 pounds every couple of weeks, then that's fine. Eat your dinner at 5 or 6 o'clock, right? Make it so that's something you can tolerate for years, because that's what you'll need to do. Right. Another important thing is that a diet has to include, it has to work for you biologically, where you're actually responding to it, you're losing weight. It also has to work for you socially and psychologically. You can stand being on this diet. And I know sugar is the most detested thing in the planet right now, but to be honest with you, I won't really last on a diet that doesn't allow me to have at least a couple bites of something sweet every now and then. Sure. And so Atkins diet, I lost a lot of weight on the low carb diet, the Atkins diet, but it really just wasn't tenable because it wasn't a lifestyle I wanted to have for the long run. This is what I like about intermittent fasting, is that I have plenty of latitude during the day. I can almost eat, not everything I want, but I can fit in a little couple pieces of chocolate there. I can get out a vanilla latte. Nothing bad happens to me as long as I do that overnight fast. And that's what people like about intermittent fasting, is the simplicity of it. So ratchet back, you can do anything from a 16-hour fast, as little as that, which is really not too bad. It's 6 o'clock or, 7 o'clock in the evening until, the next morning, 9 or 10 o'clock. And it's not too bad. So shorten that interval of not eating to the point that you can actually stand it. If you're more of a glutton for pain like I am, extend it further when you're trying to lose weight, and that will burn it off faster. So it's really just a matter of how fast do you want to lose.
So it's funny because GymWits just did an episode on intermittent fasting. So it's definitely something that is really gaining in popularity. It's great timing. So now I'm the most cynical member of the GymWits, although there's a little cynicism. Well, probably not in Tony. I don't think Tony has any cynicism in her at all. And one reason we started the podcast was to discuss the health and fitness industry. And I personally believe that much of it is built off exploiting people, exploiting their weaknesses, whether it, with food or exercise or whatever it is. How do you feel that if you believe this, that the health and fitness industry, diet industry as well, exploits people? And what are some ways to combat that, especially if you are someone who is struggling with their weight?
I agree, it exploits people. It's a $60 billion industry. That's a lot of money. And people can be quite lost when it comes to losing weight, especially if they try things that hasn't worked, They're kind of gullible, like, oh, eat these spices and you'll lose 10 pounds. You see headlines like that all the time, and you can't do that. It's great for selling books. If you want to sell books and be part of that industry, you can do that. You can sell articles, books. You can sell a spice kit that's supposed to make people lose weight. I think, to me, it's a sad situation, really, because people are being taken advantage of and people are making money off of this. And you see all kinds of programs that do that. I mean, just look at your bookstore. There'll be 100 books on dieting. Some of them are very dubious. And so the solution to all this is educate yourself. You really have to take this into your own hands, especially if you've had resistant fat. You've been on diets, it hasn't worked, something's amiss, there's something you're missing. Don't be somebody's fool, right? Don't just go out there and be gullible to someone's sales pitch, or it looks really good, or they're thin. The person who's like, a 30-year-old bodybuilder with six-pack abs is going to be in a very different place from someone who's 55-year-old woman, postmenopausal, had 2 kids, gaining weight quickly. And that person's, the man's regimen, right, the 30-year-old bodybuilder, is going to be very different than what's going to work on the woman. He's burning fat like crazy. This might not work. So his diet plan might not work for the 55-year-old woman. And this is where you really have to individualize your own diet. So face the facts about fat. It's not always easy to hear. I have some hard truths in that book. But understand them. Know what it is you're fighting, and know what the nature of fat is. And then start to understand it for yourself, educate yourself, and tailor a diet to make it work for you. And that's really the key takeaway. And it's not easy. I don't have a 1, 2, 3 diet plan in there that says, follow these steps and you'll lose weight automatically. There really isn't something like that. Everyone's extremely different. But if you understand the basics of fat, the basics of, the challenges, especially as we get older and our hormones change, the bacteria we have as a role, the genetics as a role, when you start to understand and diagnose what is your problem, why can't you lose weight, I think it'll help you ratchet up your efforts a little bit in the right way that hopefully gets your weight moving again.
Definitely.
Cool. So now another interesting idea. So obviously a lot of dieting and exercise comes down to self-control and being able to manage that. And with everything else going on in our lives, it sometimes is difficult to manage, and it's really easy to give in. And one of the ideas, which I'd never really heard but makes perfect sense, is that you can actually train your self-control. So can you explain a little bit about that, like how it's possible to really train or exercise your ability to control yourself?
Yeah, I have a whole chapter on that, because anytime you make a change in your life, anything at all, it really needs self-control to make it stick. It won't. Like, whatever New Year's resolution you have, whether you can be more organized, you're going to balance your checkbook more often, whatever it is, you've got to have self-control to make that stick. And it certainly is the truth for fat. You're changing a whole diet regimen, you're changing your exercise, you're changing the way you live. How could it possibly stick if you didn't have the willpower to make it stick? Mm-hmm. And so willpower is like a muscle, and it's actually, it's quite research, and you can make your willpower stronger, just like you make a muscle stronger. And you do that by having these small wins. So you start small with self-control. Just start making your bed every morning. There's research showing that people they make an effort to stop swearing for 2 weeks or straighten their posture for 2 weeks, they actually have more stamina. They can take on more stress following that. So you have these small successive wins, if you will, that help build up your confidence, help build up your self-control, and you build from there. So if you have like a successful week of dieting, you can be stronger the next week. You know how to refuse to do more. This doesn't become, it becomes automatic. It's not a decision you make anymore. It becomes an automatic thing that your brain just knows how to do. And, be careful too. There's something called dichotomous thinking, whereas when people go off their diet or off their plan, whatever it is, they tend to think they're a failure. They have failed, and they might as well just come off their diet altogether. They can't make this work. And it's a very binary way of thinking, that I'm either a winner or I'm a loser. This is one of these thoughts that's completely detrimental for weight loss. In fact, the obesity coaches I spoke to, this is one of the biggest contributions they have for their patients, is they talk them back on the diet when they've gone off. And when I talk to their patients, it's one of the biggest wins they get out of the program, is that the doctor helped them get back on the program. So just because you've had an ice cream bar doesn't mean you have to give up everything that you've lost so far. Just get back on. So try to watch yourself. If you're someone who's like very self-punishing, who really takes things hard, like if I didn't get an A, I failed. If I got a B, I failed. You have to learn self-forgiveness and self-love, and just get back on the program. Don't be too punishing of yourself. And that's part of the willpower learning. So build up your willpower slowly. If you backtrack here and there, don't kill yourself over it. Just keep going. And also in the chapter, there's other things that you can do to make it easier to comply with a diet. I talk about temptation bundling, which is, it couples a negative activity with a positive activity. So there's this research where they show people go to the gym and they have these audio novels that they store at the gym, like these really salacious, gossipy audio novels that they have. And they find that the people who have it locked at the gym, they can't have it outside of the gym. They go to the gym more often, right? So they're pairing a positive activity, being able to listen to this audiobook with their workout, and they get more out of it. They go more. Mm-hmm. In fact, when they stop that program, some people even paid the gym to keep their audio novels for them because they knew that was making them go. And so, there's a number of things you can do, and there's something called stick.com that you can get on where if you don't meet your goal, they'll take money away from you. If you meet your goal, they'll give you money. So use whatever kind of tactics you need to get in there and just start building up self-control. And really, after a few months, you'll see you're not even making the decision anymore. You'll just automatically kind of be in the groove of this new life you're crafting for yourself.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for behavior modification. It's one of the strategies I use with my clients. So I could definitely, I need to read your book because I really love everything that you're saying. So I'm excited to learn more from you.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And the book is really an effort just to be truthful about how hard this is. And, for some people, they're disappointed. They wanted a meal plan or they wanted some silver bullet to come out of this in the end. And there is research that hopefully will give us that silver bullet, down the pipe. But for right now, the truth is this is really hard. Your fat is a very clever organ and knows how to come back when it wants to. You have to understand fat if you want to fight it properly, or you will lose. And, if you're gullible, you're not educating yourself, you're really susceptible to everyone else's meal plan, diet book, any way that they want to make money off of you. If you've had a hard time with this, your fat has come back, educate yourself, know your fat in order to beat your fat. And just face facts. I know we're in this world of fake news where we just want to listen to the news that feels good to us. I'm really truthful in this book. And again, I'm a scientist, so I'm totally based on facts and what the research is showing right now. And this doesn't have to be depressing. That's one reaction I've gotten sometimes is that, it's depressing, it's really hard to lose weight. I actually found this just so completely empowering because all the things I thought I was observing, I confirmed that I truly was, and I knew the reason why. And now I knew how to go. I can never eat like my husband eats, right? I can never eat even like other people, other friends in my age that I know. They can eat more than me, but I understand why now. And that gives me the power to sustain and stay on my diet because I know what's wrong with me, basically.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep.
And I can definitely attest to that. I think it really comes through in the book, and it doesn't feel like. I think it's something I even learned reading it is trying to articulate to people can be a challenge because you don't want to, because you're going to disappoint them. Like they want a quick fix. But I think you do it in a great way where between the examples, between the kind of studies and the examples you give of other people and the detail and the breadth of information, it made me, it will make anyone feel a little bit more informed and, more realistic, take a more realistic approach. So, I really recommend it highly. So now, where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you? Website, email, or Twitter, or social media, anywhere where do you like people to contact you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Facebook. It's at Sylvia Tara, PhD. Also on Twitter. Facebook's a good way to reach me. Also at the website, thesecretlifeoffat.com. That's a good place to get yourself on the email and get updates and things like that. And I think there's an email on there, too, that people can reach me on. So Facebook's typically best for my readers. That's where I look at my messages from them. And like I said, the course, I'm working on it now, but I'm trying to make it so that the book has a lot of facts in it. It was overwhelming for some, so I'm trying to come up with a course now that makes it a little bit easier. And also there's a little bit more kind of self-help on how to diagnose your fat and then what to do about it, how to work towards steps until you find that right balance point of what you need to do to lose weight.
Yeah, and I can see you almost like I can see the wheels turning in reading, especially towards the end of the book. I can see the gears turning as far as, the way that you describe how you go about it. If you can find a way to do that with others, I think that would be great. And we'd love to have you back on once you do have the program up and running, because I definitely could see the seeds being planted for something that, it's hard since it's not one size fits all. It's like, how do you approach it properly? And I can kind of see those gears turning a little bit. So we'd love to have you back on once you have that started.
Well, terrific. Thank you so much, and I'd love to be back.
All right, so Tony, I'm wondering, what did you think of all that?
I thought she was very knowledgeable. I mean, she did studies with fat specifically, and I think that the takeaway pretty much was, forgetting even about the science, I think the takeaway is you have to find something that works for you and your lifestyle, and it has to be sustainable. And you're going to find challenges along the way, but the more you understand your microbiome or you understand your metabolism, it might be helpful to know that before getting into a program. But I don't want that to prolong anyone from actually getting started.
So Ryan, you would recommend people reading this book, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good because it does give you a lot of information. It's not, that's the problem, is it's not a diet book per se. But I think
people might.
But the value in it is it teaches you that there's got to be a different way of thinking about dieting and exercise in general. We talk about this all the time. That it's really the approach, and so one of the important things about it is that the information and the studies and the kind of case studies, it just goes to show you the futility of yo-yo dieting and the futility of going on crazy diets that don't work, and that you have to figure out what works for you. And so I think that's really important. And like I said, I think it's harder. It's harder for me without the nutrition background that you have, Tony, and that Sylvia has. But it kind of teaches you that it really is person specific, and the best thing you can do is figure what works for you, but also that it's got to be long lasting, and it's got to be well thought out, and that for the most part, these crazy diets that the industry. Crazy diets, crazy exercise programs that the industry kind of throws at us, unless you can do it for the rest of your life, are not going to work. And so I think the book does a great job of kind of explaining that. And yeah, I definitely highly recommend it.
Yeah, I also think I need to read the book, or I listen to the books. I do everything on audio. But before I could really even weigh in it and say, really form an official opinion. But overall, I did think it was very thoroughly thought out, well researched. From what I could tell, she knew her stuff. So definitely something that I'm going to listen to. And then possibly when we have her back, I could weigh in a little bit better.
Cool. All right, great. Well, as usual, all of our stuff can be found at TheGymWits.com. Again, check out and subscribe to the Tips with Tony podcast if you haven't yet.
Yay!
It's on all iTunes, or not yet. Wait, no, Apple Podcasts. I want to get in trouble. It's on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify.
Oh, you're not supposed to say iTunes?
Yeah. Yeah, Apple does not like that anymore. It's like, like they don't want you to say subscribe in iTunes, like subscribe in Apple Podcasts.
Oh my gosh. I just learned something new.
Yeah, so make sure, don't say iTunes.
Nope, too late.
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all that good stuff.
Libsyn.
Anywhere you find your podcasts, you'll probably find us.
I think YouTube too.
Yeah, YouTube too. Just not SoundCloud. For SoundCloud, we have issues with that. But everything else, you can find the GymWits. So even on, we have the app. So download the app. So again, GymWits, Tips with Tony. You can find us at GymWits.com. Tony, where can people find you?
Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, Tips with Tony. Tony with an I.
Cool. All right, well, that's it. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Tony Marinici, a.k.a. Tips with Tony, a registered dietitian.
And we are
The GymWits.